what we have on our walls in here internally, one of our biggest sayings is focus on the customer's wants and work backwards from there. But I am just unbelievably shocked that Oregon floated a bill to kill all hunting. Like that was real, not fern fang hunting, not who knows what other small animal hunting, like literally all hunting. Worked his way up from a craps dealer to a foreman to a GM of a property and continued to work his way up. I was super fortunate to be a pretty talented football player. That's where I ended up taking to. I stopped playing baseball sophomore year of high school and just took football on full time.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today we have Lorenzo Sartini on the podcast, good friend of mine, also the founder and CEO of goHUNT and Outdoor Class. I first met Lorenzo and his team in 2013, and ever since then, they have been moving and shaking and changing this industry in so many ways, which we do talk about. But first, we dive into his family history in gaming in Las Vegas, his ties to UFC, his roots in being an amazing athlete, his newfound love, golf, hunting, conservation, family, founding companies. Check out this episode and make sure you subscribe on YouTube and watch the full interview on there. Tell a friend. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Much appreciated. Cheers. Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. You can use code ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off. That is ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off at outdoorclass.com. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's ALTITUDE for 10% off on peaksequipment.com. Lorenzo, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing good. How are you?
Well, it's still raining in Oregon, which sucks, to be honest with you.
Send some down here, please.
We got a lot. Between Montana and Oregon, we could probably provide all the water you need.
That Montana stuff is crazy. Can't believe it.
I know. I was out there last weekend, and we crossed the Missouri River on the way to the Western Hunting Summit, and it was insanely big. It was scary, like full-size logs going down it. And
crazy, man. I saw a cabin get taken away. When did I see that? Maybe 2 days ago. A cabin on the bank, like a big cabin, not like a little backwoods cabin.
Yeah, that was on the Yellowstone, I think, down by Gardner. If you guys have ever been in the north entrance of Yellowstone through Gardner, there's only one road, and it goes through this really narrow canyon, and that whole road just washed out this week.
Wild. That's where I went to college. I don't know. I went to University of Montana in Missoula.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. So spending a bunch of time up through there and hunting like crazy up through there, like to see that on video, what's going on is just wild.
I know. And the Clark's Fork in Missoula was insanely big too. I don't know.
I saw a video of that too.
Yeah. So Lorenzo, you fly kind of below the radar and above the radar, kind of a little bit of both. But in this podcast, I really wanted to dig into who you are, because I think you've had a really interesting story. And obviously we'll talk about, what you're doing now, but I wanted to start back at the beginning and learn more about you. Where did you grow up?
So I'm born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, which, I get a bunch of different reactions when I tell people that. Vegas isn't necessarily thought of like, an outdoors to produce some type of outdoor person. But when you grow up here in a family that that's what they're into. It actually is a recreationalist paradise almost. I mean, other than the heat and no trees. I mean, got to set the landscape, right? It's not like it's Montana by any means, but I mean, we're so close to southern Utah and Zion and all the southern Utah hunting. We're super close to really good Nevada hunting. So we're 3 to 3.5 hours away from all of the best hunting in Nevada. We're 4 hours to Arizona and all the over-the-counter hunts down there that I grew up doing. So it's interesting. Like, it's not thought of as, this outdoorsman's place, but there's a pretty good faction of hunters and fishermen out here that all kind of tend to live on the northwest side of town. Mm-hmm. Obviously all throughout town, but there's a nice little community out there of it. And that's where I grew up my whole life.
Yeah, I mean, it's Vegas. I mean, just by nature of what it is,
Yep.
You say you grew up in Vegas, people think the Strip. I mean, it's like if you grew up in Nashville, people think of Broadway or the Opry.
I used to be asked. So when I first went to college in Montana, I actually had quite a few people ask me, like, so did you live in a hotel? Like, no, of course not. I mean, there's houses here,
Right.
That's how crazy it is when people think of Vegas. Is there's nobody really thinks of like a residential community in Vegas, but 95% of Vegas is off the Strip, and the Strip relies on tourists, right? So it's an interesting town, super transient when you go down to the Strip and kind of you're in that world, the casino world. But when you're on the residential side, like, man, these families have been here forever, and lots of them are hunters, lots of them are like off-road guys, and
yeah. So obviously there's a huge outdoor element to the community. What else keeps people there? Like, just because let's be honest, the climate is during the winter and spring but the summers are brutal. It's just like Phoenix, right?
Oh, it's not as bad as Phoenix, but I mean, once you get over 110, 115 degrees, like, it doesn't matter what you are. It's just absolutely brutal. Mm-hmm. But I will, like, my wife and I talk about it. We have a 3-year-old son, and we talked about it, how, one of my best friends is Clay Hill. He lives in Colorado, Kremlin, Colorado, which is one of the wilder places in the winter. It's pretty high elevation, gets super cold. They get the winter blues up there. So he calls me all through the winter. Kids are stuck inside, and you just can't do much because it's so cold.
Right.
And I call him in the summer because we're stuck inside because it's so hot. You can't go do anything outside with the kids. So it's like,
right.
When you live in, Colorado, Montana, sometimes you get stuck inside in the wintertime. And then down here, it's the exact opposite. So between July and September 1st, I mean, there is just, if you're not just soaking in an ice cold pool, you can't be outside. Like, it's unbelievable how hot it can get.
What happens when the power goes out that time of year? Does that ever happen?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You hope you have a friend or family somewhere close to go into their house. I mean, if the air conditioning goes out, you have no shot of staying in your house in, July, August. No.
How did the Native Americans do it?
It's a great question. It's honestly a great question. I mean, Mount Charleston, which is right outside of Vegas, stays, in the maybe mid 90s through July, August, but it's way up there in elevation. So I would imagine the natives were kind of tucked away in some of these caverns up there in the bigger mountains we have around here. Because Mount Charleston, I mean, it's almost 11,000 feet, or I think it is 11,000 feet.
Wow.
Just right here out of town. Yeah.
No way. I had no idea about that.
That's what keeps us a little cooler than Phoenix. Is we have on the west side of town here, we have Mount Charleston and Red Rock and some of these bigger mountains. And it kind of keeps a nice little, cloud shelter on that side of town. Sometimes, I mean, when it gets like ultra hot, we'll get some clouds that roll in over those mountains and keep the west side of town a little cooler.
Wow. Interesting. What side of town is that on?
The west side. So just like if you heard of Red Rock,
of course. Everybody
mountain climbs. It's just to like the west northwest of Red Rock, which is Mount Charleston. That's our biggest. There's a ski resort on it actually, which is even crazier in my opinion. Yeah,
that's crazy. So you grew up obviously spending a lot of time outdoors, mostly hunting. What other outdoor activities?
Yeah, so I grew up. My family's always been huge into sports. I mean, my dad grew up here in Las Vegas. He moved here when he was young from Northern California. His family they're farmers up there in Northern California. So they do ag farming, and they still do. So like my lineage on my dad's side, still farms in San Joaquin Valley in Northern California. But him and his dad moved their family here when he was like 2 to 4, something like that. So he grew, I mean, he's basically Las Vegas local his entire life. And he grew up playing sports here. He was Mr. Football, like back then, the whole, city voted on the best player. He was played on the basketball team as a freshman. He was an unbelievable athlete. So anyways, we just kind of grew up as a sports family. I have an older brother. He's 2.5 years older. And it was just constant football. He played football and basketball. I played football and baseball. So it was just constant sports. And then I would fit hunting in as I could. Right. So, growing up here before I was 12, I mean, obviously like most Western states, you got to be 12 years old before you can hunt yourself. Right. Wish it was more like Texas, but it's not. And, so I would just beg my dad to go hunting. I mean, he was an outdoorsman from his side of the family, the Sartini side of the family. And he didn't do it a ton because he was so busy with work here. He's been in the casino industry his entire life, basically, ever since he finished school. And it's such an operationally heavy life. Like and back then too, I mean, you think about the lack of technology back then. I mean, nowadays, every single casino is hooked into a system. You can see all of the money all day long, huge security barriers from these security cameras, all this stuff. Back then, they didn't have any. So the only way to protect the casinos were to be in it, right? So he essentially lived in the casinos, worked his way up from a craps dealer to a floorman to a GM of a property and continued to work his way up. But he would fit in hunting. That was his outlet was hunting. And I would just beg him ever since, I was a tiny little kid, beg him to go. And, he'd give me a BB gun when we'd go duck hunting and I'd pretend like I was shooting him. The whole, like most kids grow up in mountain towns and those kind of stories. I actually had some very similar stories, probably just not as often. And then a lot of sports mixed in. And my motivation for hunting was just like any chance I got, whether it was upland, whether it was waterfowl, whether it was big game, traveling to Texas, to Arizona, to Idaho, whatever it was, like I had to fit it in anywhere around sports. And that's what I grew up doing. So, honestly, that's why I ended up going to University of Montana, is because, so as I was growing up, trying to fit hunting in between the sports I was playing, I was super fortunate to be a pretty talented football player. That's where I ended up taking to. I stopped playing baseball sophomore year of high school and just took football on full time. And we have a college prep school here in Vegas. It's called Bishop Gorman. I don't know if anybody's into like high school athletics. I'm sure they've heard of it. Now it's a powerhouse. When I was there, it wasn't, but it was still like a college prep school. So I played football at a super high level there, and football and hunting don't mix entirely well.
That's why I never played it.
It's literally the exact same time. From start to finish, the exact same time, August to end of November. And so it was tough, but I would fit hunting in as much as I could with my dad and my uncle Heath, Uncle Heath Sartini. He lives in Cedar City, Utah. So he kind of has Southern Utah locked down, and I would try to get up there as much as possible in between practices and games and all this stuff. And I was fortunate to get quite a few scholarship offers for football. And my number one thought in my head is, how can I do this easier? Like, how can I play football and hunt easier? Because at the time, like, yeah, Vegas, we have a lot of opportunity, but it is a solid 4 hours away any direction you go. And that's not a lot now. Like in my life now, 4 hours is nothing. But when you're in high school playing football, 4 hours is huge.
Yeah,
like,
you can't do it.
No, you can't really make it work. Maybe you get a day and a half of hunting at best. So I started looking at schools where I could hunt like from town, hour drive from town, fly, fish, hunt, whatever I could do. And I had a friend of mine here in Las Vegas tell me about University of Montana. So I went up there at a football camp, one of the summer football camps, the summer between my junior and senior year. I went up there to check it out, and literally fell in love with it immediately, and was like, "Yep, this is it, man." Like, everywhere around Missoula, you drive an hour. You're waterfowl hunting to fly fishing to big game hunting, right? It's like anywhere.
So your theory was, how can I be as close to it as possible so when I do get time, it's not that hard to access?
Correct. And it was actually a little bit more than that. So it was literally like my first choice decision was hunting.
Yeah.
And it was like not settling real well with me. My personality, I'm the kind of person like, if I'm not entirely into something and it's like I just kind of have a unsettling feeling in my gut, it's hard for me to give it my all. Mm-hmm. I just feel guilty. I kind of have that guilty conscience on me. Mm-hmm. So when I was up there, post senior year, going up there for football, and I was just so focused on hunting, it really started to be like I had an internal unsettled feeling of like, man, I'm really taking this opportunity away from somebody who wants to play football. Like I'm going here to hunt, not to play football. Like football's secondary. And I just, I kind of had this weird guilt in me and talked to my family a bunch. And it was my first, as you gain maturity in life, you kind of go through these rocky times and thoughts and trying to figure things out. And, am I a quitter? Am I this? Am I that? Like,
right.
I was going through all those thoughts. And then finally I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, somebody really wants to play football and I really want to go hunting. So let's just focus on that. So I stayed in school up there, but I didn't take the scholarship and didn't play football. So
no way.
So I stayed there all 4 years and I literally hunted and fished every single day I possibly could. And somehow
it's so good hearing stories like that. I was a golfer, so I didn't play football because of the same reason that you just mentioned. I just couldn't do it. None of my friends got to hunt, and it was my number one priority. So I played golf, because it's a spring sport, and I didn't really bear hunt at that time or anything. So, but the biggest tournaments in junior golf usually come in that August to September range because you have all the kind of preliminary tournaments all summer, and then usually there's some big championships in August and September. And I remember vividly getting into some of these things, some of these big tournaments. And I remember one specifically I turned down because it was in August. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to come play that turn. I'm going to get my ass kicked because I'm not going to care. And I'm going to be totally distracted. And so, no, the answer is no. And I'm going to go elk hunting, and I won't regret that at all. But it's one of the reasons I was state champion, but it was one of the reasons I was never like great beyond like the local level is because it was always second priority. And that's just, but it's, if you're into the outdoors like that, there's just nothing that measures up to it, right? No,
there isn't. It's when you have that connection to it, and there's just something in me that's like so connected to just being out there in that world.
Yeah. Well, and also, like with football, unless you're planning on going to the NFL, the longevity of it's pretty short. And you're going to be able to do the outdoor thing your whole life, and so you don't want to hurt your body. Like, this is my priority. You know what?
My real turning point, like my real decision maker was I was in a playoff, getting close to the playoffs, and we were playing for a spot in the playoffs my senior year of high school. But I had my first elk tag in southern Utah, and I vividly remember, and on that day, all I could think about during that game was don't get hurt. Like, just don't get hurt. I got to go on this hunt. I'm leaving literally right after the game and getting in the truck with my Uncle Heath. We're driving to southern Utah, and I'm elk hunting Saturday, Sunday. And all I could tell myself was don't get hurt. Like, after coming home from the elk hunt, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, what a shitty thought. Like, I'm not playing at my highest level because I'm trying to pad myself for something else that I want to go do. And just like you said, like, if you're going to the NFL, cool. And I mean, I'm a pretty realistic person, right? I mean, I'm not small, but I'm not NFL big, like that level of talent is just insane. I had a couple friends of mine that ended up being very, very high level successful NFL players. And I just, them on the field compared to others, it's like, all right, this is, put some perspective here.
Yeah.
And that was like my main decision-making point was that end of my senior year in that game playing for a playoff spot. And all I could tell myself was don't get hurt. It's like just such a shitty feeling afterwards to think about that,
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was my decision maker. And when I went to Montana, man, I took full advantage. Snowmobiles, hunting, fishing, everything.
So your dad worked his way up in the casino industry.
Yep.
Was there always kind of that entrepreneurial spark in your family in terms of like hard work leading to much bigger things?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the story of my entire family, honestly. Like,
I'm assuming you're Italian based on your name.
yes, yeah, I am. On both sides, actually, too. My mom and dad's side, I'm Italian. But my family has an unbelievable story. Like, it's crazy to think that I am the one. Like, how in the hell am I the one that got born into this? Like, it's a wild feeling, or like to look at the story and history of my family. So my grandfather on my mom's side, so
Okay.
Frank Tita, my grandfather on my mom's side, my mom's dad, he lived in Galveston, Texas, born and raised in Galveston, Texas, down on the island down there. I don't know if you know anything about it, but back when he was there, I mean, it was not a nice place, right? Just kind of a stuck there kind of a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean by that? Like,
Yes, of course.
It was hard to leave, but there
Yep.
wasn't much there.
Yep.
He had a cousin move out here to Las Vegas and become a bellman. And his cousin called him and was like, man, there is so much opportunity out here in Las Vegas. You got to be out here. So he, at the time, had my mom. So he had him, my grandmother, and my mom drove out here, the three of them, in a car with no air conditioning from Galveston, Texas, to come out here to be a bellman. And while he was here working as a bellman, he saw at the time that there was no locals casinos. There was no local gaming here in Las Vegas. And he really noticed what
do you mean by that? What does local gaming mean?
Back then it was the strip still. Like, it was only strip properties. There was no local style gaming. So
like a place for people to go that don't want to go to the strip.
Yeah, well, yes. And to think about it in the terms he was thinking about it is like, okay, these casinos down here on the strip employ all of these Las Vegas residents, but they don't have a place of their own to go to a casino, to go enjoy the entertainment of a casino. Like, they, toad on all these people that come into the strip casinos. The last place they want to go on their off time is back to work and
True.
have some entertainment. So we saw this void, and he somehow was he was the most charismatic guy on the planet. Like, it's hard to explain guys like him when they're just, he's I don't know, the look in his eyes, you just kind of believed everything he ever said. And somehow he talked his way into getting a loan that he just definitely was not able to, that he shouldn't have had as a bellman, right? He built the first locals casino here in Las Vegas. So he is considered the founder of locals Las Vegas casinos. So like the residential side of, the non-strip properties here in town.
Yep.
And he built the Bingo Palace. And I mean, if that's not entrepreneurial, I don't know what is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So he moved out there as a bellman. How did he raise the money to do it?
I wish, I don't know. I wish he passed in 2009 and I was still fairly young.
It would have been interesting to know.
I would love to truly understand that story. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
That couldn't have been cheap.
No, definitely was not cheap. And somehow he pulled it off. What I have been told is that he's just so charismatic. Like, people just believed in him with this idea, and he pulled it off. And he built the Bingo Palace, and yeah, he was the founder of locals gaming here in town. And it's kind of funny. So he started, he called it a car a day in May. So this promo where he would give away a car every day in the month of May. Okay. That promo still exists in Las Vegas today.
Really?
Still today, casinos run a car a day in May. And that was like that's what he built.
That's awesome. So that was on your mom's side. Yeah. So because your dad ended up being obviously in the same industry. So
So my dad moved here at a young age. His dad was the president of the housing authority here. So like all the old folks and apartments and all of the city housing, he was in charge of all that. So he was, the GM of all those properties, I guess. And my dad grew up like painting apartment rooms for him, and while he was in and out of sports and school. And my dad ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Utah to go play football. And while he was up there, he played his freshman year, sophomore year, and then there was a changeover in coaching. Mm-hmm. And he has a very similar story to mine. When he was up there, and sorry if this is a little confusing because I'm just putting this together now. His uncle, Bill, the Sartini side that lives in Cedar City now, was a businessman, and he had property in southern Utah. So my dad's uncle had property in southern Utah. So when my dad was at University of Utah, he'd go down and hunt and fish as much as he could with his uncle and his cousin, my uncle Heath. And he had a similar story where the changeover in coaching, he hated the new coach and just said, I want to go into business. I want to do what my Uncle Bill does and, just hunt and fish. And so that's what he did. He ended up going to work for my Uncle Bill. And he was doing well, but his business was refurbishing the axles, the tires and axles underneath mobile homes. So as mobile homes would pull into mobile home parks and want to become stationary for dwelling purposes and, city taxes, all that stuff, they would go in there and make deals with these mobile home owners and rip out the tires and axles, pay them for it. They would refurbish them, and then they would sell them back to the mobile home companies. Clever. So he had this like refurbishment business, and my dad worked for him going and doing these deals where, he would make deals with the owners of these mobile homes and then sell them back and the whole deal. Well, my dad didn't have a college degree, and he was doing that for a while, and he kind of was like, this is great, but what's next? I don't want to be traveling around all these states for the rest of my life and doing this. So he ended up going back to school at UNLV and getting his business degree from UNLV. And when he graduated there in his time, casinos were, it was like the gold rush out here for casinos at that time. People were building them left and right. Like my grandfather on my mom's side building Bingo Palace. There was some other families that, decided to do the same thing, like the goHUNT family. So Michael goHUNT followed the residential or the locals gaming like my grandfather did and started building some of these residential casinos. My dad went to work for him when he graduated UNLV. And that's where he started as a 25-cent craps dealer, which back in the day, 25 cents nowadays sounds like, whatever. Back then, 25 cents craps with no limit on it. Like it would, wasn't terrible. Yeah. So he was dealing craps. He was dealing blackjack, worked his way up to a pit boss, which kind of oversees all the games, worked his way into a bunch of different positions into the GM for Michael goHUNT, and then ended up essentially running one of his casino properties. And him and my mom crossed paths at a UNLV basketball game. Mm-hmm. And the rest is history for them, obviously. Here I am today for proof. But they crossed paths, started talking, got serious. And both, like you noticed, both sides of my family, the Fertitta side and the Sartini side, are very Italian. And when my dad asked my grandfather to marry my mom, he said, yes, but there is no fucking way you're working for the competition. Like, not happening. So you got to come over here, right? So he ended up going over to my grandfather's casinos, and he ended up taking I can't remember if it was one or two properties at the time. Him and my grandfather and my uncles ended up taking it from one property to 9 properties. And then he got out of that for a couple years. And then started what he does now, which is like bars and taverns and casinos and a bunch of local stuff. It's called Golden Gaming. So that's what he does now. So he started his own thing post casinos. My grandfather started their own thing. My uncles have done their own thing. Like, it's pretty insane. Like, I pinch myself sometimes thinking about the bloodline. Like, man, this is unbelievable. I'm the one sitting in this place.
Great leaders to learn from too, because it's hard enough to start a business anywhere. But when you're talking about starting a business, especially a gaming business in the most competitive space in that space, which is Las Vegas, right? Especially that back then, like people played by different rules back then, and
$100%.
it still remains a cutthroat town, right?
It
So
wasn't a fair game back then. It's still not entirely fair, but it definitely wasn't fair back
yeah,
then.
so like
They somehow managed it.
yeah, they got through that, and that's crazy, man. So
Yeah. So
you
the entrepreneurial spirit is crazy deep in the family.
so so tell me, because I don't know, but how did your like how did what's the UFC connection? How did that happen?
So that's my uncles.
Okay.
So my mom's two brothers, Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, and Dana White. Everybody knows Dana. My uncle Lorenzo and Uncle Frank are definitely like under the radar guys, and Dana was the president and face of the UFC.
Right.
Yeah, I grew up while I was playing football. I grew up as Dana was, my mom's boxing coach. I would go in there and hit mitts with him, to get ready for football season. I mean, so I grew up with Dana just being like a friend of the family, essentially. And then they had this UFC idea, and that's what they did. So,
that little thing called the UFC.
needless to say, the vision of UFC too, like what they did with that is it's insane.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah.
I don't personally know Dana, but I'm a UFC fan, and I follow him. I don't know anything about your uncles, but obviously that's admirable. But the business side of what they've done,
Yep.
again, in a brutally competitive space,
Yep.
where not everybody plays by the rules, and is super alpha, obviously.
Like super alpha.
Yeah. Done something totally incredible. And built like a machine that is, I mean, nothing's unstoppable. Everything has its own era, but it's virtually unstoppable right now.
As close as you can beat unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you do for work once you hit the workforce?
So it's a good question. Statute of limitations here, hopefully, but so to work in the casino industry, you have to be 21, right?
Right.
So there was kind of like a unspoken, I couldn't do much, but kind of, that's what I grew up around.
Is that to do anything? Like literally anything in the casino? Even if you're just a waiter?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I think it's changed quite a bit. I think you can be 18 in some of the food service stuff now.
Okay.
But alcohol, gaming, any decisions or any management that is around gaming, it's 21. You have to have some type of gaming license.
But you can vote when you're 18. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. You can vote when it makes total sense. You can vote for who's going to lead this entire country, but you can't,
you can't work in a casino.
Gotcha. Machine. So I played a lot of football, did a lot of sports through the summers with school. And then when I was in college, I did a lot. I'd come home and do a lot of in the office stuff, but I couldn't really do anything legitimate because of the rules. So I just kind of bounced around in a bunch of different parts of Golden Gaming, the business my dad started. Did a bunch of stuff in there. And then when I graduated at 21 years old and came home, that's when I took an analyst role. So I graduated with finance and management degrees. Mm-hmm. So I went into an analyst role and then worked up through the analyst role I was running our partners side of the business. So it's a little confusing here. So stop me if you want to understand it better. But in the bar and casino industry here in Las Vegas, it's not an actual bar. It's not an actual bar. We all make our money on the slot machines that are inside the bar that actually sit on the bar top. So when somebody pulls up a chair to the bar to have a drink, there's a slot machine right there.
Yeah.
And it's called a tavern license. So the license is you are able to have 15 machines in your bar. They have to be embedded on the bar top. There's all this legal jargon of qualifies a tavern license. So we own currently still our own, but we also have our partner route, which is if Dave Brinker wanted to open the Altitude Bar,
Let's do it.
Right?
Let's
and
do it.
Put machines in there.
Yeah.
I would go to you and say, hey, we'll provide all of the infrastructure for the gaming.
Yep.
You get 80% of the revenue. We get 20% of the revenue.
Yep.
As a split. And we had about 704, 705 of those at the time. So I worked my way up into
managing all those
relationships and partnerships. And then the goHUNT idea spurred right when I was about a year and a half into that part.
So are you a gambler?
No. Sports gaming, yes, just because. So here, it's an interesting thing in Las Vegas. You don't have any sports teams, right? Mm-hmm. I can't stand California. I'm sorry for anybody out there who is mad at me. It's like the California teams, all the California stuff. I never took to any California teams. I never, the Bengals were my team as a kid. They were orange. I mean, imagine that, the goHUNT color. So I'm like, oh, they're orange and black. That's awesome. That's my favorite team. So it wasn't true. It was just because of the colors. And so you grow up, and as you get older and you want some of that like competition in your life, like, watching competition in your life, it was hard to have a team. And the only way to make it interesting is just to sports bet, right? So sports betting, yes, because it's just kind of an ingrained thing in Las Vegas locals, because we have teams now with the Knights and the Raiders, obviously. But yeah, that's what I grew up doing since I was 21. But
you're not playing slot machines.
Oh no, not at all. There's a reason why these casinos exist.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why they keep getting bigger and better and more expensive.
Right. Well, I have a little. I like playing penny slots, and I really liked it for like a few months. I have a buddy who really likes it, probably a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And but I got so burnt out on losing that I'm like, you know what, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. I mean, I'll throw a 20 in and have a beer with a buddy or whatever. But
you ever gambled through Montana?
What's that?
You ever gambled through Montana?
No,
like
I haven't.
Any of those slots, Montana? That's
like Lucky Lil's and all that.
So the family business, Golden Gaming, has a big slot route up there too. Like I was talking about the partnerships down here.
Yep.
So we have a big slot route through there in Montana.
Gotcha.
I wish timing is everything in life. Why couldn't we have had that when I was in college? If we would have stayed there.
Yeah, then you could just run that, right?
Yeah, but then goHUNT wouldn't have happened. So
yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah. So you're a pretty detail oriented guy, I gather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you type A?
I'm very quiet. I've got you get older in life and you really figure out your strengths and weaknesses. It feels like almost on a day-to-day basis. And over these last 7 years with goHUNT, so I founded it with Chris Porter, who pretty well. Mm-hmm. He's definitely more of like the outgoing, like
social butterfly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's more the connection. I'm very quiet, but I am definitely alpha, in the sense of like not control, but I don't know the right way to say that. Like, I'm the quiet guy in the background, but then Chris and I work really well with each other so I've gotten to understand my weaknesses very well over these last 7 years, and Chris balances those out for me like extremely well. So him and I have an amazing working relationship. And not that I would ever compare these in all reality. Like, believe me, I understand the difference in levels here, but I would compare him to like the Dana and me to my uncle, kind of a. Well,
it's important to have those comparisons in your head because you grew up watching that, and
exactly.
I mean, look, like we're all really flawed, and we also all have strengths, and if you can't recognize those, you're doomed in any partnership. I mean, because really what you have there is, I don't know how the business is structured, but from the outwardly looking in, you have a partnership, and because Chris has to run the business, and you are also pseudo running the business, but you guys have your lanes, and you have to be able to, sort of riff off of each other. And if you can't do that, it's not fun.
He is a natural born leader. My brother is one of the best natural born leaders I've ever seen. He's incredible. But me, I'm a lot more quiet, and I'm a lot more like kind of the vision side of it. So Chris runs the operations day to day, and then I'm kind of the vision of like what we should or could do next. And then Chris runs the team, like the actual team of, motivating them to go execute on what we decide to do.
So I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you guys and for those that don't know what we're talking about, Lorenzo is founder of a website called goHUNT.com, and among other things, which we'll talk about. But I remember the first time I ever saw you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is like in the 15, 16, 17 era, somewhere in there. Is that when it started?
So it started in 15. Yeah. 15, that's good.
Because I remember the first time I met Chris, and one of the things that I automatically liked about you guys, and to be honest, it's the same reason that probably there's people out there that don't like you guys, is the fact that you kind of approach things fearlessly. Like Chris seems like sort of a fearless leader. Like, it's like even though he's extremely intelligent and also has a sharp pencil, he's not afraid to also just use blunt force and just figure it out as he goes. Right?
Absolutely. You could not have said that any better.
Yeah. And I admire that because that's sort of how I operate. I'm a little bit more like you. I'm kind of keep the peace type guy. Yeah. But in terms of trying to approach life fearlessly and not trying to perfect things before you throw them out there, I think that's the best way to approach life, because that's kind of the adventure part of it. You'll appreciate this. Yesterday I had on the podcast, actually, she lives there. You should meet her. Her name is Mace Curran.
Yeah.
She flew for the Thunderbirds for several years. She's the first female Thunderbird pilot, fighter pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, she's a badass. But she said something along the lines of adventure is not, you may know the destination, but adventure is knowing that you don't know everything that's coming, but knowing that you'll just figure it out, right? And I appreciated that from you guys. Now, like I said, some people don't like that because it scares them and they feel like, it's kind of this bully tactic. I don't necessarily get that sense from you guys. You guys, you're just going to do what you want, and you're going to hurt some feelings along the way for sure. But I don't know if there's any, you can't operate in this world, especially the business world, without doing that. And maybe that's some of that Las Vegas, look, this is business and we're going to do what we want. I don't know.
That's the definition of progress in the world too, right? Not everyone is going to accept or be happy or support what you're doing. And that's just, if you don't have that, then you're not doing something, and then it's not progressing as it should. If it's not growing at the same rate of support, right? And a little less, obviously, you want it to grow slower than the support side. But the way I've always viewed it, and the way I view things is 80% is good enough. 20% is where the growth comes from. It's like the personal growth, internal growth. That's in that 20% of life that you can't count on, you can't see, you can't because you can't ever get anything 100% of the way day one, right? It's just, you can't do it.
Right.
You can get it 80% of the way. That's good enough. And then the 20% is where the internal growth comes from.
And I wonder if you can ever hit 100%.
I don't think you can. I honestly don't think you can.
Yeah.
And looking at my family, they, as much as they've done and what they continue to do, they're not at 100%. Their whole life is figure out 80% of it is bet to the best of your ability. Yep. And then you survive and figure it out the other 20%. And that's where your lessons, your growth, your maturity, that's where all that comes from, isn't that?
Yeah.
funny?
Yeah, my new analogy is you have to view yourself as MacGyver. I think that's the biggest mistake that people make in terms of not starting something or not doing what they want to do is they think that you have to have everything figured out, and they don't realize that the people that they look up to that are successful they probably started way short of 80%.
Absolutely.
They probably started at like 30%. And the other thing is like you might figure out let's say you're going to start a business, goHUNT. You may start out and with 80% of the things figured out, but the reality is like every day that business changes, and the
Yeah.
next growth stage, you're going to have to like start over again. I remember this with Sitka. Like I remember, you build plans, and then 6 months later you have to blow them up and build new plans. Six
Yep.
months later you got to blow them up and build new plans.
That's a good way to look at it. The 80% doesn't mean 80% of like the end all be all. Like when
Yes.
I'm 50 years old, it's not 80% of that. It's 80% of the decision at hand.
Yep.
Like if you can get comfortable and feel good about 80% of what you are trying to do in that moment of time,
Yep.
the 20% is what you gotta figure out in MacGyver.
That's
And
right. We got to
and
MacGyver
it
it.
only lasts, and I actually would very much agree with, and it's still true to this day, that only lasts about 6 months in time. Like every time we make decisions, it feels like it's 6 months, maybe 9 months at like the most.
Right.
When it
Right.
starts back over.
Right. Exactly. So when you guys started goHUNT, I'm just curious because I obviously, like I said, I remember it, but what was the original vision? Like, well, first of all, let's back up just a little bit. At some point, you decided that you want your own thing, right? I mean, obviously, you come from a very successful family,
Yeah.
and the easiest route, and it's not easy, but the most no-brainer route would be to work in the family business, right? And get a high-level position, get paid very well, all the things, right? You have a finance degree. I mean, it seems to fit pretty well. You grew up there, you know the industry.
Yeah.
But at what point did you say, no, I want to start my own thing?
Yeah. I like this on the personal side of me, I've never really opened up about this side, but growing up in my family, it's amazing, right? Like it's like I said, I pinch myself. Just can't believe that I'm the one born into this. Like how insanely lucky is that? But on the other hand, right? Like this isn't obviously no one's going to feel sorry for anybody growing up like I have, right? But I mean, as a boy becoming a man, and you're like trying to forge your own path and your own identity and your own personality, it's like, man, this is crazy. The shadow is just insane, right? It's like this weird,
like an identity crisis type thing. Like,
I want to say more identity, but like just I've always been focused on like, I don't want anybody to ever say that, oh, it's because of his family, right?
Yeah.
And what I've come to terms with in my, now into my 30s is like, can I cuss on this show, by the way?
Of course, cuss away.
Okay. I'm usually I've only cussed once so far, and it's been hard for me to.
Yeah.
My whole thing is like, you know what? Fuck it. Everyone's gonna people are gonna think that anyways. Who cares?
Yep.
Like now, just focus on what you think you can do and what you think about the situation, right?
Right.
The part that I can control.
Yeah, you can't control that.
But I've always been so aggressive of doing my own thing to have my own success, like that I can hang my hat on. And I still don't know exactly where that comes from, like why I'm just so motivated to have my own success. But it's been with me ever since I was, even growing up as, a mid-teens kid, like I've just wanted to do my own thing and have my own success that I can hang my hat on. And, it's,
I think that's admirable though, dude. I mean, like, because I get what you're saying. I mean, it's just the reality of growing up in a successful, wealthy family. Like, You know, it's everybody thinks that, oh, everything's just handed, you know, silver spoon, you know, all
Yep.
these things. And in a lot of cases it is true, right?
Yes.
It is. And that's what I said. And in a lot of cases the easiest route is for the kids just to kind of do they're never going to get fired. They can kind of do whatever they want, you know, da 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 da. And they get this rap. And like I said, in some cases it's true, but I totally can understand. I can't totally understand it because I wasn't born into that, but I understand what you're saying in terms of you care enough about you're a motivated person and you're
Very.
successful in your own right, and even though you don't need to prove that to anybody, you want to prove it to yourself and to
Yep.
the world that no, yes, I am Lorenzo Sartini, and all these things we've already talked about happened, and yes, I was very lucky to be born into that, which you've said several times. But like I'm also like I've created a pretty cool life myself too, and
Yeah.
you know, and it's really important to me, and I'm taking risks, and I'm doing all these things. And you know,
Yeah.
I'm not just sitting here surfing on a beach in Malibu and driving Lamborghinis, right?
I mean, some days it sounds like that would have been the right choice. But no, I honestly, I still have yet to like truly find like what that fire is in me about like just doing my own, having my own success to hang my hat on. And
Hmm.
I like, there's nothing wrong with, you know, my brother's running the family business now. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, I look up to him more than a lot of other people out there that maybe have done their own thing from the ground up. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Like I am blown away how good he is at what he does and what he's done with the business in his time there. So there's like, it's not like I don't respect that side of it because I obviously do. I mean, he's one of the ones I look up to the most, but I've had this internal fire of my own success, no matter how big or small either like that. And so my thought always was like, look, I don't care if it matches up or not. Like I want to create my own success.
Yes. Yes.
And I've just been motivated by that for a long time. So when I was with the family business, before goHUNT, like I was always, I was never truly settled there. And like I said earlier about the football thing, like if I just kind of have a guilt pit in my stomach, it's hard for me to go full force. And I am a person that goes absolutely like full send when I'm
Hmm.
into something. And if I don't have that aggression in me, I just don't feel like I just
Yeah.
don't feel right. I'm not doing
Do you think some of
stuff.
that comes from football too?
Absolutely, for sure.
Because some of your personality traits remind me of Jason Harrison's most powerful personality traits, and he was a football player.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me on a podcast the other day what it was like working for the two founders of Sitka directly, and what I took from each of them. And the thing that I told them that I took from Jason, which is similar to I think what I just said about your guys' company, is Jason fearlessly and 110% took on whatever he wanted to.
Yeah.
And he didn't ask permission, and sometimes it bit him in the butt, actually a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it soured people's opinions of him, including mine sometimes. Like I did not enjoy the way he was like a bull in a china cabinet in a way. But that was also his greatest strength, right? And that's also why he built an incredibly successful couple of incredibly successful companies in a very
Yeah.
short span of time, when other people would have been kind of circling and planning and thinking. He was like, no, fuck it, we're doing it. Like this is what we're gonna do, and we're gonna world domination, you know, kind of. And again, you can look at that as a narcissistic or you know bullying or meathead or whatever you want to call it, like whatever negative things you want to call it. But every strength is also like has the equal amount of weaknesses, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yes, all those things may not be true in some cases, but the strength is that fearlessness is contagious, right?
It is. It absolutely is. And it's funny you bring up Jason. So when I was working for the family business and I'm like, you know, just wanting to go my own way, where I felt at peace and where I wanted to give that energy to was the outdoor industry. It was just like it was constantly pulling me there. And growing up in it, like I grew up around, you know, the original Hunt and Fool cast
Yeah.
in southern Utah. I grew up around a lot of other hunters, Ryan Hatch, like some of
Yep.
these, like I was in, I was around, I wasn't in the industry, I was around it. Um, and that's where I wanted to put my energy. Like I was always focused on putting it there, just like making the decision to be an outdoorsman instead of hunt. Like
Yep.
that's where I was just drawn and pulled to. And when I was working for the family business, the original catalyst for goHUNT, which has nothing to do with the vision of goHUNT, by the way, I sent an email to Jason Hairston. So when he launched KUIU, he launched his campaign as the Defiant Troublemaker, and it like resonated with me super deep. So I sent him an email. I titled it Defiant Troublemaker in my world, right? And just wrote him I was young at the time. I didn't really know what I was asking or wanting. I've saved the email and I go back and read it from time to time just to level set where, where my personality really started to grow. Like my own internal drive started to grow, and, just to level set there. But man, it is slightly embarrassing to reread that email now, now 7, 8 years, 10 years later.
Are you comfortable sharing any of the things that it said?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dig through my email and put this podcast on pause to truly remember.
No, but just the highlights.
Yeah, it was more of like the world that I came from, what I was born into, but I don't want to be in it. And I want to defy the lineage and go do my own thing. And I was essentially asking for a job. It didn't really come off very well in the email, but to my surprise, he emailed me back and he's like, cool, where are you out of? And I said Las Vegas, and he was coming through on business. And I met him at one of our taverns, one of my family's taverns, and him and I had lunch together. And talk about that, like, fearless bull in a china cabinet. Him and I sat down for lunch for 2.5, 3 hours. And I don't know if I've ever been more motivated in my life from leaving there. And there was a part of me that I was very close to going to work for KUIU in Dixon, California.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was very close. Have you ever met Chris Settlemeyer, one of Jason's friends? Jason was thinking about breaking out his backpack line, that Icon carbon fiber frame backpack line, into its own. He wanted to spin it off into its own thing. And Chris, and if I remember correctly, I mean, this is 10 years ago or so. I've been doing goHUNT for this is probably 10 years ago. Him and I were going to go and be a part of that. And I was in Pahrump, Nevada, when I got the call from Jason of like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. Are you in? And I'm standing in the parking lot of one of our properties in Pahrump, Nevada, on the tailgate of my truck on the phone. And I'm like, I'm in. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm moving to Dixon, California. And it ended up not working out. He ended up not breaking it out. But him and I stayed extremely close.
Right.
He was a huge mentor of mine through the first years of goHUNT. When I first launched it, actually, he, very graciously just put pamphlet flyers in every single one of his shipments that went out for nothing.
Yeah.
In return. I mean,
and so that is him to a T.
Yeah.
Like, trying to get any other company to do that would have been difficult because they're only going to want to support things that are proven, right? Yeah. This is the problem when companies get mature. They start off as like this entrepreneurial spirit, screw it, high risk, adventure, like 80%. And then as they get big,
they go into protection mode.
Yeah, they go into defense instead of offense. Yep. And Jason was never in defense. Well, he was. I mean, if you pissed him off, he was for sure like an aggressive dude. But my point is from a brand perspective, he was always in offense, and it was annoying because even though he hired me at Sitka, and I worked with him for several years there and was friends with him. Once he started KUIU and I was still at Sitka, we were like head-to-head competitors, right? Yeah. And so it sucked to compete against. Trust me, like every day was like a battle. And yeah, and he was a fighter.
I heard a lot of stuff about Team Sitka when I was.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was a fighter, and but anyways, that was him in a nutshell. It's like throw the goHUNT thing in there, and his team's probably like, well, what's goHUNT? Like, and
He
he's
just,
like, I don't care. Lorenzo's a friend of mine. Put it in there.
yeah, and he helped kind of round out some of the vision with us. Um, so to rewind a little bit to on that vision side of it, when that didn't work with Jason, doing the icon backpack thing, it was kind of back to the drawing board for me. And you know, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind while I was in Montana going to school there was the amount of hunting and fishing and outdoor opportunity that was there, but was so hard to find. Like I couldn't believe how hard it was to find, because I'm coming from the Southwest in Nevada. Like hunting opportunity is not, that's not your first thought. Really good hunting is your first thought. Like,
Right.
big animals, great hunts, very low hunting pressure because we don't give away a ton of tags. It's like, you know, it's kind of like the mecca for the enjoyable, the real enjoyable hunts, right? Like, you know, the once in a lifetime or like once every 10-year kind of hunt that you gotta wait for. And that's what I grew up around was, you know, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, go to Idaho on the over-the-counter tags when I could. And that it was, opportunity was not the first thought. And then I go to Montana, and the reason why I ended up thinking I was taking my scholarship there was when I was there on my visit was the amount of hunting opportunity in Montana to Wyoming to North and South Dakota to Idaho, like everything that surrounded Montana. It was just a complete paradigm shift in everything I'd ever known about hunting. Like, is it going to be as enjoyable as not seeing any other hunter on the mountain like it is in Nevada, because that's typically how the hunts are here? I mean, it definitely wasn't like that, but how nice to wake up and know I could go duck hunting within 45 minutes, and not just duck hunting, like really good waterfowl hunting. And I could go kill a doe, and I could kill a buck, and then I could travel to Idaho and kill 2 bucks over the counter, and I could go do this in North and South Dakota, and so on and so forth. And it's like complete paradigm shift of, holy shit, I really could hunt every single day. Like if I structure this properly, I can hunt every single weekend from August until end of January. Like this is amazing. Growing up where I came from, it was hunt maybe 3 weeks a year, maybe
if you're lucky, right?
If you're lucky, maybe 3 weeks a year. And that's with luck and drawing tags and having to travel clear to Idaho or something like that from Nevada. So I'm like, this is incredible. And then what really allowed me to understand the opportunity though was meeting kids, the same, you know, person. They're into the same stuff I am, same personality as me of being an outdoorsman. And I got to meet a resident of Montana and a resident of Wyoming, resident of Alaska, resident of Idaho. And I got to understand it from a resident perspective, where residents know, you know, 80% of their of everything there is to know in their home state. Like I could tell them about Nevada and how to get them access into hunting Nevada and what they should be doing. They were telling me that in their home states. So I'm like learning all these states from a mentored perspective. They were essentially my mentors of their home states. And coming home, it still wasn't the vision for goHUNT at the time. goHUNT wasn't even a thought, but I couldn't believe that paradigm shift in hunting. So when I came home working for the family business, man, I was like, I need more than 2 weeks off. Like, what are you talking about? You get 2 weeks off in a business, right?
That's horse shit.
Yeah. What are you talking about? This is horse shit. I need way more because I just found all this hunting opportunity. Like, I need way more. What are you talking about?
Right.
So when I'm back here working for the family business, and I'm like, then I got really strategic with hunting because I only had so much time. So now I knew the opportunity out there, and I had to be ultra specific with my time and strategy and planning this out. This multi-state, okay, I'm going to apply in these states for, you know, the quote unquote trophy hunts or like enjoyable hunts. I'm going to do these states for opportunity if I don't draw. And I really started to build like this whole multi-state strategy thing where I knew I was hunting at least 3 weeks every year, negotiated extra weekend.
Hopefully a lot more.
So I was home doing that. And Chris Porter at the time, so this is where Chris Porter and I crossed paths, is he came from the online poker industry. And I don't know shit about the online poker industry. And he gets mad at me that I can't ever remember which one he came from. It was either Full Tilt or Poker Stars, and I can't remember which. And that's his backstory. So he gets mad that I can't remember, but like, I don't know shit about those. So
well, I got to have him on and dive into this.
Yeah, he's got a really interesting background. He was managing poker talent. He was working for either one of those two big conglomerates.
Well, you have met today, right here on this podcast, the worst poker player of all times, which is me.
Let's go. Hunting camp. Let's play.
Dude, I'm the worst. I won't even play. I won't touch it.
That's fun, man. Hunting camp, that's fun. Don't play with Porter. Porter's really good. Like,
see, that's the problem.
He'll win like the Las Vegas local tournament. Like big.
Really?
He's won it, I think, 2 or 3 times, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's impressive.
But yeah, he came from either of those two companies, but he came into our family business because when the Fed shut down online poker, when they kind of put the black cloud on it and shut it down on the US market, saying it was illegal, the way that they were going to make it legal was you had to have an onshore, unrestricted casino license. That's what my dad had.
Oh.
But we didn't.
So hold on. When did this happen? I didn't even. This is all history. I don't know.
You're gonna have to. You got to have Porter on to talk about.
Okay.
It's a wild. Right? I think it was 2000.
So it was legal. All these things started.
No, it was not. It was not ever truly legal.
Oh,
Somebody listening to this podcast who understands the poker world is going to be so frustrated that you and I go back and forth.
Well, welcome, because I frustrated a lot of people on here about things I don't know. So
it was such a big deal to the poker players because it was like a gray area legal, right? It was like total gray area. So there was nothing onshore, on U.S. shore, that was like the platform you could play on. It was all offshore, but U.S. citizens were playing and they could play for money. And they were winning money, and they were playing these big national tournament, like not even national, international tournaments, where the buy-ins were huge, and the winnings were even bigger. They put poker on this massive platform because, I mean, instead of having 1,000 people buy into a state tournament, you were having tens of thousands of people buy into an international tournament. It was crazy.
Right, big deal.
So the feds shut it down because of tax purposes. That is one of the reasons I remember is the U.S. wasn't collecting any tax on these people that were gambling, which gambling tax is huge. It's massive. It's 7% of gross revenue is what it is for an onshore casino. It's crazy. So there's a lot of tax revenue. It actually might have gone up. That was back when I was with the business. So it probably has gone up since then, but it's crazy. So they shut it down because they weren't collecting any tax. And then they were trying to put parameters on how to make it legal in the US. So they had to have, so the platforms that existed out there were all offshore. And to build a platform that would compete with their technology is insanely expensive. But what we had and the family had, my dad had that unrestricted casino license here onshore in multi-jurisdictions. So at the time you had Nevada and Colorado. That was the other nuance to it, is it had to be multi-jurisdictions. So my dad fit the qualifications. And so Porter came to work for the family business to head up our interactive gaming license. So he was hired to broker a deal between my dad, who carried the gaming license, and a platform who carried the technology of where players could go play.
Right.
And they were making big moves on that to become, a legal interactive gaming license holder and platform. And Chris and I, he's a great guy and super easy to talk to. Like you said, social butterfly. I'm pretty quiet. So I'd be in my office, doing these state strategies and trying to get everything ready for hunting. And he'd come into my office what the fuck are you doing? What is all this stuff? Right. And I'm trying to run my own draws and I'm trying to run my own state strategies. I got all these white papers everywhere. And I'm got all these magazines laid out on my desk. And I don't know if you've ever had these types of interactions with Porter, but when he doesn't truly understand something, he will literally ask you a million questions in a row until it makes. Have you ever had one of those?
Oh yeah.
Him?
Yeah, for sure.
It is numbing how many questions he can ask and how fast he can ask them. So he's running through all these questions, and it's like day after day, because obviously, as we know, as hunters, I mean, the application process is December through, June almost.
Right.
So he would be in there all the time asking me these questions. And it really started to spark, like, he would ask me, well, where's the ESPN.com of this? Like, where's all this stuff? I'm like, well, it doesn't exist. There's this forum, Monster Muleys, and there's this forum, Rock Slide, and there's this magazine. And, oh, so you use the magazines to do it? I'm like, no, I use the magazines to not go there. Like, everything I'm finding in my research, calling biologists and trying to run my own draws, which I'm not smart enough to do, clearly, now that we actually have somebody who can do it. I was wildly wrong.
Right.
But I'm trying to do all the stuff myself. And he really started to, like, understand how much opportunity was in this world, was in this space. It was so far behind, like, at the time, what Zillow was doing to the real estate industry. Completely disrupted the MLS platform.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it from that angle. And I understood hunting well enough from these multi-states, from being in Montana in college, meeting these guys from, the Dakotas and all these other states, Montana, Wyoming. And so the questions he was asking me, I had legitimate answers to. And we started to develop, like, man, there really is a huge void here. I'm like, and he said, well, if I wanted to get into hunting, what would I do? I said, well, you'd call me, or you'd call, like, a concierge service. There's some out there. Like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't call travel agents anymore. I don't call a real estate agent anymore. I just go on Zillow and, like, why can't I do that? And I'm like, well, because there's so much in hunting. There's so much nuance. There's so much this. And he's like, well, why don't we put all of that, all of the nuance, all of the information, all the opportunity, why don't we put that all online, like a Zillow and like travel agent businesses? And I'll never forget, that was the true like nexus for goHUNT. I looked at him, I'm like, holy shit, we can do that. Like, this is so much information. And he kind of laughed at me. He's like, yeah, bro, it's online. You can fucking do anything. Like, you give as much information as you want. I'm like, holy shit. So him and I spent a little bit of time putting things together, kind of rounding out this vision of putting everything a hunter needs in one spot to solve for me having these, yellow notepads and magazines and forums open and trying to do my own math and all this stuff. Like, let's bring that into this online world. And that's where we started, is we condensed and brought in all of the Western hunting information we could possibly find.
Wow. And
as we were building it out, that insider tool, that our membership inside the goHUNT platform, the other thing that was missing was, like, this community. We felt like this true single place community spot was missing, like the ESPN.com, this content. Back then, people were paying $100 for a magazine membership to read somebody else's hunt story. And by the way, remember, this is before Instagram. So, like, that was the big catalyst for wanting to do this content site, is it was before Instagram was really a thing. So the only way people were hearing and seeing other people's success and their stories and their lessons and, their tips and tactics and all that was in magazine. Well, let's put it for free online. Like, that hunting deserves a place for that.
Yes.
So we built, like, this content site as well, which is where I really took to, back with UFC and what they did with content, and, looking at Red Bull and Yeti and all that. I'm like, man, I really took to the content vision, and we built that out, and we did a decent job. I mean, at least we've been validated that we've done a decent job with success that it's had. So we would drive traffic through the content, and then we would have this information of this product that shows the opportunity and information of everything that's out there that a hunter would want to find. And we've just built that out further and further and further. And again, to that point of every 6 months, you blow the plans up and start again. And it couldn't have been more true, is, for the last 7 years of having a product, it's like 6 months, blow the plan up. We got to do this. Now let's go here. Like, this is our North Star. And then you get 80% of the way there, you blow it up, and you go, okay, here's our new North Star. And it just happens over and over again, where the vision has been and has always stayed true that everything a hunter would ever need or want is in one place. And that's the North Star that we've always marched to. But the plans of how to get there and the features and products that we need has changed on 6-month tranches.
It's funny you mentioned the North Star, because one of the things I do on the side is I consult companies, and it's funny how often you run into these companies, startups, but also mature companies that don't really have that. Like, they're like, well, I want to make money. And it's like, well, yeah, I know, but like, what do you truly like? How do you make every decision out of the hundreds of thousands of decisions you're going to make in the next 10 years? How do you make every one of those decisions? Like, what do you base it off of? I don't know. And it's like, but it's like it's not complicated either. It's probably, the best ones that I've seen are probably like one sentence,
Absolutely.
But that one sentence could be like the hardest thing you've ever written, right? Because it usually can be like, well, yeah, but what's above that? Yeah, but what's above that? Yeah, but what's above that? Like, let's get, 50,000 feet. Fuck 20,000 feet. Let's get 50,000 feet. Like, what truly, like, it's not about making, yes, we're for profit. Okay, that's great.
Money, the way I've always looked at it is money is the byproduct. If you're staying true to your North Star, money's the byproduct. Yes. It should be the last thing you focus on. It's just by happenstance, that's what hits you on the back end.
Yes. Yeah. It's like the reward for staying true, right?
Exactly.
But if you base especially short-term decisions, long-term decisions on money, you're going to be in some real bad trouble, And even some of the short decisions, like you'll encounter, especially as we've gotten to the point as a world where we can measure a lot more things than we could 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We get in this phase where it's like, measure, conversion. We forget, and this is going to be super geeky business talk, so forgive me out there if you don't like this, but there's what's called a sales funnel, and the top of the funnel is where consumers enter into your funnel, and then the bottom is where they buy something, and in between the top and the bottom, you can break it down however you want, but there's like 1,000 things, right? And so like most entrepreneurs and businessmen focus on the bottom of the funnel. What can I do right now that converts to a sale right now? And that can feel really great. It's a good dopamine hit, right? And fine. But if you actually want to build a sustainable brand that actually does something worthwhile, or not worthwhile, but like the companies you admire don't look at it that way. How about that?
Definitely.
They go, how do I create loyalty and like tell a story and build a community and connection and all these things? And that doesn't happen by going, buy this right now and you get 2 free this and da 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 da. It's like, it's a whole process. I've always looked at it this way, and you can tell me if you guys kind of look at it the same way. It's like dating, right? So if you're going to date, if you make the decision to date, I'm going to put myself out there and decide to date. You walk into a bar and you meet somebody. You don't walk up to them and try to convert in the first minute. No. I mean, if you do that, you're gonna come off as a real creep, right?
You're going to jail if you do that.
Or but most likely, if you're really trying to find like a long-term partner, you're gonna walk up to them and you might say something funny or whatever. But really, what the first date is about learning about each other. And then the second date, you dive a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. And I've been married for 14 years tomorrow, and we're still learning things about each other. The point is the customer cycle for a business is no different. You're building a relationship with somebody, and it takes time to convert that relationship into something tangible. And it may never. And actually, most of the times it doesn't, right? That's why conversion rates on websites are like, 1 to 3%. You're going to pull somebody in your funnel, and 97% of them don't give a shit about you, right? And 3% of them, which would be really good conversion rate for a lot of companies, might buy something from you. But do you agree that like having that long, and it's hard to have because oftentimes it means you might lose money for a period of time, or you might not be able to pay yourself for a period of time. But do you agree as an entrepreneur that that's kind of the best way to look at it?
It is the only way to look at it. The brand, at the end of the day, the brand will always win if you have a strong enough brand. And the byproduct is the money that comes from the brand, right? But like when we, in that sales funnel, we talk about that all the time. That middle ground is the most valuable, because of the people that don't convert, we still love them. They're still hunters. They are still putting their money towards hunting licenses and conservation and the protection of hunting. So we respect them just as much as a customer of ours. The goal we go for there is to just learn something about them that they are into, that we can build features or something to speak to that person in the future. Right. So it's just this constant, it's, that dating thing, it's so simple, but it really is a good analogy. Like you learn about yourself at the same time you learn about from somebody that it doesn't work with, right? Like if it doesn't work with somebody, you learn about yourself at the same time, right? Oh, I didn't like that. This is why it didn't work, whatever. So there's so much value in the 97% of people who don't convert. If you just can connect with them and listen to them and hear them out, and hopefully they will give their opinion about something, and we can take that as a piece of value to make us better in the future. So it's the only way to look at it, of community connection, the long term. I mean, when you're starting something from scratch, which, that's the most prideful thing I have that I've done in my life, is to truly start something from, we didn't have a name, we didn't have a logo, we didn't even have a phone number. And to build the brand into what it is today, because we have been only focused on community connection, the long-term customer first, like not money first, not conversion first, customer. What do the customers need and want? Let's listen to them. Let's hear them out. We might think we know what we want, and we do it. We have a list of 10 things all the time on our roadmap that is what we would want. But then we listen to the customers on, are any of those 10 things what they're saying? Yes. Okay. Well, those bottom ones are now moving to the top because we saw those as, bottom priority. And so we shift around these priorities. And then some of the time, it's stuff that we don't have on our roadmap. And it's like, all right, huge pivot. This is first in line. Like we just shouted at for this. Like, and
if anybody, hopefully there's a lot of people listening that have been in a healthy relationship before. That's no different. Like there's things that you want, and there's things that they want. And sometimes they do the things you want, and sometimes you got to do the things they want. That's how a relationship works. It's about push pull, listening, communication, and literally all businesses are a relationship with a consumer that's buying a good or service from them, and that's it. So that's a really healthy. I mean, and that's probably why you guys have been successful to this point. And so tell me a little bit, Lorenzo, about the outdoor class. So obviously we're recording this June 16th. You guys just launched outdoor class a couple days ago.
Yep.
Why did you guys decide? And it seems like you're kind of positioning it as separate than goHUNT, like it's a separate entity.
It is.
What made you guys say, man, we don't have enough work on our hands with goHUNT. We want to launch an educational series?
So what we have on our walls in here internally, one of our biggest sayings is focus on the customer's wants and work backwards from there. And so everybody who works here sees that. And we've done a good job of that in goHUNT, right? But there is something out there that the customers want that I didn't see a way for us to do inside of goHUNT, which is true education, true honing the skills, education, the master classes for hunters and outdoorsmen and women. So we saw this, like by listening to the customers, we saw this void, and there was nowhere for, adult onset hunters or people who wanted to that weren't hunters at all, but wanted to get into it and feel comfortable with it. And, a place to go for seasoned hunters to kind of hone the last bits and pieces of their skills for maybe a tag that they finally drew for a hunt that they haven't had the opportunity of going on before, like an archery, elk rut hunt in Utah, which is like or in Nevada, the primo of hunts, but you can only do it every so often. So it's not like you're going to be a pro at that the very first time you have to tag, and you don't want to waste it, right? So there was just this void there was a void in information gap, and not information as opportunity in what's available out there, but a gap in information of like tips, tricks, lessons, and in an educational format, like a real takeaway format. Of course, there's podcasts and YouTube and all this stuff, but that doesn't lend itself for a true like start to finish. I started here, I finished. Now I am truly better at what I just watched and understood and learned. Right.
Right.
And so when we looked at it for this opportunity, the one thing right off the bat we knew we didn't have was none of us know how to teach people like in that type of format. None of us know how to mentor, these types of courses we wanted to do within the walls of goHUNT. So we partnered with Randy Newberg, Elk 101 and Corey Jacobson. Elk 101, his UEH program, the elk hunting or EHU, Elk Hunting University. Partnered with them, folded that in as like the starting point to what these courses were going to be, a lot like the University of Elk Hunting, and then RMEF as well. Because conservation, a lot of this is driven from the standpoint of conservation as well. One of the best ways you can ever protect something is by getting more people to understand it for what it is and be comfortable with it. And so there's a huge conservation angle here too, with hunting being under so much fire recently. Like I've talked about it on a different podcast, but I am just unbelievably shocked that Oregon floated a bill to kill all hunting. Like that was real, not fern fang hunting, not not who knows what other small animal hunting, like literally all hunting. There was a bill floated to the floor of the state to kill all hunting. To think in 2022, that's where we are. It is really scary to think 20 years from now what is possible if we don't have enough education and understanding of what hunting is, right? Conservation, tradition, lifestyle. My personal belief, call me crazy, but like we can't remove ourselves from the primal world and expect everything to be okay. Like we are the stewards of the primal world. We're the only living, breathing, alive being out there that can understand complex situations and be able to manage them strategically and properly enough for the better going forward. If humans can
absolutely
look internal, reflect, we're the only ones, getting a person to do that is the hard part, right? To understand the long game instead of the short game here. But but with more education and understanding information out there, the better. So there was a conservation standpoint from this too. But if you look at it from like the first point of it, point A, the analogy I use could be a really shitty one. You tell me. Like you go to get your driver's license, you have to go take driving courses. You have to go take tests. You have to go do this. You have to go do that. When you get your driver's license with your picture on it, you know how to drive. You might not know how to drive very well, but like you know how to drive. You are going to be successful at getting from your house to school or from your house to the grocery store, right?
Most likely.
When you finish your hunter safety course, you essentially have no chance of being successful your first day of leaving the truck to go hunting and coming back with an animal, or even like leaving your house to know where you're going hunting. Like there's this huge gap of, okay, I have my government issued hunter safety card, state issued hunter safety card. Now what? Like, I don't even know now what, right? And it's just, there's such a gap in information there. And when you compare it to the analogy of a driver's license, it's like, okay, well, let's start there. Let's start with, this is, okay, you have your hunter safety, you can hunt. This is where you start. And even a step higher than that too is like anybody who just is interested in the lifestyle and what it takes. I mean, obviously they're going to have huge amounts of value in this too, but And that was the starting point from it.
Well, and it's done so well, man. You guys did such a great job on it, and I hope people check it out. I mean,
Yeah.
you already heard the ad, folks, at the beginning of the show for that, but
Yeah.
it really is going to be an amazing thing. It is an amazing thing.
And then the part that I'm excited about, just because of where I am in my, hunting life and career, is we took that narrow vision of like where to start, but that's a pretty small vision when it comes to, when it comes to getting, getting out there in a big business. So we wanted to grow that vision. Sorry, but I just got a text message that kind of threw my.
That's okay. That's okay.
So we wanted to like extrapolate it into, well, how can somebody like me also gain something from this? Like how can I hone the last 10% of my skills that are just a little bit, maybe a little dull? Like, how can I sharpen those, right? So you bring on guys like Remy Warren, bring on guys like John Barklow, like how to thrive in the backcountry and the survival side of it. And you bring on, Corey Jacobson. How do you not learn something from him elk calling when you finally do have that rut elk tag? Like, how do you get those mature bulls to really off and go after? So we've really rounded out this vision of like, okay, there's the where do I start? But then there's also the how do I hone the last 10% of my skills? And how do I really become a more successful hunter? Trying to solve that, 10% of hunters kill 90% of the animals. How do we kind of bridge that gap a little bit as well? And so
well, it's amazing. Even if you're somebody that's been hunting forever, like I have, I've been hunting since came out of the womb. When I spend time around these people, like last weekend, I was around some of these folks, and every single time, even to this day, I learned something new. And even my dad, who is 70 now and has also been hunting his whole life, and his best friend, who are legends in our local area, they never ran out of things to learn either. They're still learning. So that's the cool thing about life in general, but especially the outdoors, which we have very little understanding of as humans, especially modern humans, because we spend most of our time in front of screens like we are right now. And these animals live out there all year. And it's, like we're entering their world and all the odds are against us. So like, I get so tired of egotistical hunters that think they know everything.
Oh man.
And
I agree.
There's nothing that drives me more crazy. It's like,
I agree. Well, you said you were a golfer. I found golf way too late in life and I absolutely love it. So wish I would have found it earlier. But you look at like hunting in life, and people compare golf and life to each other, right? It's one of the things I love about golf the most. Bad break, bad luck, you got to live with it. You got to figure it out. It's like this whole thing. Well, golf and hunting are extremely similar too. It's like very, very similar. And you look at Tiger Woods, the most successful guy ever at golf. That guy, he is still talking to, he talks to Justin Thomas about what he's doing with his irons. And he talks to this guy. If that guy still feels like he needs to learn something new or look at something a new way in the world that he lives in, like, that's Tiger Woods, right? I mean,
yeah, he has coaches. He has multiple coaches.
You can never know everything, and you can always find a different way to look at it, a different way to think about it that will help settle you into, your personal.
Yeah, I often wondered why I liked golf and hunting, because both of them are basically 99.9% failure.
Yeah.
Like the moment you hit a perfect tee shot, like, or have a good hole or a good round or a good putt or whatever, that any second you're going to have an awful hole or an awful round or an awful shot.
For me, it's a pure long iron shot like that. That is what keeps me going back to golf.
Yeah.
It's a pure 5-iron shot. Like,
yeah,
when it just, and hopefully you get one of them around so you don't quit golf for the next 6.
Yeah. Well, I have some bad news for you. The better you get at golf, the more frustrating it gets.
Yeah. So it's just like that one pure long iron is like, all right, I'm coming back tomorrow. And that's what hunting is, right? You fail who knows how many times.
All the time.
And it's like the day you least expect it, you pull it off and you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this again tomorrow.
Yes.
Like, I wish I could do it tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, buddy, you and your family and you guys at goHUNT and Outdoor Class, like everything that we've talked about is such an incredible story that we can all learn from. And I admire how hardworking you are, and I love being a small part in supporting your guys' companies and watching them grow. And I'm going to come visit next month, and I expect
Yeah.
to for you to show me how to play a slot machine.
I'll show you what not to do. I'll show you what to look for before you start playing, and then what not to do based on what it says.
And also maybe we can go to a fight together. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that actually would be. When are you coming? You coming?
I'll probably come. I'm coming in late July. I haven't done any dates yet, but I'm for sure coming because I'm going on to your guys' podcast.
Yeah.
Want to hang out with you guys, and then I want to go to a fight. So
July 2nd card is pretty good. The other cool thing too is I'll look if there's a fight at Apex. That's pretty cool to go to as well. We'll
yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, and let's do it again. Maybe you and I and Porter can jump on one and heckle each other.
That'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. I love talking to Porter.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, and everybody out there, go check out all the things we just mentioned, and thanks for listening.